Well, definitely. I mean, it's the whole discussion about tourism, over tourism, and the recent measures with entry fees and everything from Venice. Other countries and other cities have done that. But Venice is a very, very special place because there are only something like 50 people, 50,000 people living there permanently. And they have something like 20 million visitors every year. And the problem is that not some of them, but most of them, I mean, half of them, around 10 to 12 millions, are just daily visitors.
Yeah.
And they obviously create the overcrowded situation and over tourism. They are huge part of the problem. They don't contribute a lot in the economy because if you just spend a few hours in Venice or any other place, obviously you don't spend a lot there. They are disturbing all other tourists, overnight tourists. Anyway, I read a great article. Actually, it was part of the one of the editions of the newsletter by the pricing guru Danilo Zata.
Yeah.
He always deals with great stuff, and he spent the last two editions of his newsletter discussing about Venice, because they introduced an entry fee. And this entry fee for daily visitors, not for overnight visitors, was around €5, something like that. And there was a lot of debate if that was the right course of action, if they should have done that, and if eventually it decreased the number of visitors and had the intended outcome or not. Anyway, so I don't know, what's your take on that, Venice?
Yeah. Can you mention the other day when we spoke offline about product? And sometimes I think, because I'm in finance and been an accountant, people in my function rarely ask what the actual product is that you're trying to sell. We work in a bank and we always assume what are we trying to sell? We're selling money, essentially. But then obviously you got to make it sexier than just selling money. What are we actually really selling? Who are we selling to, etc. In this case, when you mentioned this the other day, I thought, what's the closest analog that I can think of? And I spoke to, we have wife and I know this Spanish lady just down the road who works in this health centre. And we spoke to her, she's from near Valencia. And she was just saying, it's not really a problem. The problem is that they don't know that they're benefiting from all this tourism. They don't know how to price it. I was like, this is the lady in the health centre. so she goes to charge them more. And I suppose when I was in our 20s, this is weird, a few accountant mates thought, let's go to Disney World or Land, whichever one's in Orlando, I can't remember which one it is, the one in Orlando. And it wasn't as eye-watering a price as it is now with inflation, but it was still pricey. And I thought, Venice is or Disneyland or Disney World, whichever one it is a very decent example of Venice. But loads of visitors in and out. It's got some attractions, it's got some watery things. It's kind of semi-island, semi-independent of Italy, even though it is part of Italy, etc. But it's got this kind of semi-autonomous feel to it where you could present it as a Disney whatever. And so in reality, you look at Disney know what their product is actually. And it's memories, entertainment, families get together, weddings, it's whatever you want to call it. They know this is their product and they know what they're selling, and they're selling it for eye-watering prices. As I say, I haven't been for a few years, but it's pretty high. And Venice could take that as a model, George. I'm not saying it's perfect because it's a bit egregious, some of the stuff Disney do, but it's not a bad model for Disney. And that's maybe why I want to go to conversation. At the extreme end, it's, I don't know what Disney's worth now, but it's billions and billions. And at the low end, it's let's charge $5, $10, $15 a day.
Yeah. Funny you should mention Disneyland and all these amusement parks, because one of the biggest complaints of permanent residents in Venice with the introduction of this entry fee is that we are not Disneyland. We are not an amusement park. So why, although supposedly they are the people that are going to be, benefit, they are going to benefit from this measure, but they don't like the idea that they're charging people to enter the city like if they were an amusement park. So, I mean, the discussion that have been going on the past few months all over the web, LinkedIn, social media, they have a cultural aspect as well. It's not just the pricing or the fundamentals or the actual problems or money involved revenues or whatever. It's also there is also a cultural element which is important, and this reminds me of something that pricing needs to have context.
Yes.
And you cannot detach pricing from the overall product strategy. Okay, Venice is not the product, but if you think about it, there are some things that are marketable and commercial quoted products within Venice and every touristic destination. And I think with the introduction of this measure, the entry fee of €5, and I think they are planning to increase it to €10 or whatever, there seems to be some detachment and disconnect between the actual strategy behind the touristic direction that Venice wants to follow in the future, what type of tourists they want to attract, what type of infrastructure they need to introduce in the city, because there is a problem with the infrastructure, obviously.
Yes.
And this should be related to pricing, but now we see something different. There is just an action in the pricing direction. There is some new pricing scheme, which seems to be not very, very well connected with the strategy behind the touristic, let's say, direction of Venice. This is what I see.
Yes, good point. I suppose because my wife is from the ex-USSR, and her mum sent her, she's from Kazakhstan, sent her to Dubai when Dubai was literally like, let's just say it was less developed than it is now. Very like, she described it in different ways, but she goes, yeah, there were like four hotels back in like mid-90s. And so if you look at Dubai's strategy, again, they've retained some of their cultural heritage, but they've kind of mixed it. And then they have an insane number of visitors from compared to what we used to. And Spain's a good example of how do you expand your infrastructure if you believe that's your product. And Dubai really does understand tourism as their product. So to Venice, it's either firstly, do you want to be in the business of tourism? And the answer could be yes or no. If it's no, then actually ban all tourists, any non-Italians, anybody visiting, etc. If it is yes, then you've got the extreme corporate end of Disney, which they hate, and you've got a kind of corporate end-ish, which is Dubai. And you've got many ways along that spectrum where you say, which one do I want to be, Dubai or Disney or none, or the opposite of those, and retain my cultural heritage. But you have to first do you want to be in the business of tourism? And if so, it is a business, and you mentioned, then you have to say, this is my product. And it could just be going back to 15th century. Okay, this is it. That's the business. That is the product. It's historical views of Venice, Medici, etc. Or it could be, no, our business is actually to make as much money out of tourism, like make it a hub like Dubai, or increase our brand like Disney. And so I think I'm probably struggling with what Venice's product is, let's say.
Yeah, what you said is important because I come from a touristic destination. I live in Greece, in Athens. It's a touristic destination. And I mean, we attract lots of millions of tourists every year, but it's not like Venice. Athens is not for Athens, but for small islands, it is like that. Because you see, let's say Mykonos. Mykonos is a very, very popular destination. It attracts, I don't know if it attracts millions, but definitely it attracts lots of tourists. And the permanent population, the permanent residents in Mykonos could be something like 10,000 people. I mean, just a few. I don't hear them complaining though, because they're making millions. There was no problems with that with them during whatever crisis or economic downturn. There's nothing for them. Yeah. It's just they're getting richer and richer, and everything looks good. But in Venice, it's not like that. There are many complaints from the permanent residents, which again are around 50,000, something in this area. And this is important because it is a city, people live there, so definitely. As a mayor, for instance, because the mayor introduced this new measure, you need, first of all, to take care of the well-being of your permanent residents. So that's one aspect that definitely you need to consider. On the other hand, the revenue from tourist visits over the year is something like a couple of billions for just a tiny, small city. So these guys could be rich. I don't know if they are, because I'm not sure where all this money is channeled.
Yes.
But if they play their cards right, they could be filthy rich. So there are many different angles for the same problem. And the problem is Venice a product? And what type of product is Venice?
Yes.
And this brings us to something which is important for pricing. It's important for living in a city. Segmentation. Obviously, we have different audiences that see Venice from a different angle. Travel agencies, permanent residents, daily visitors, overnight visitors, and so on and so forth. Yes. Someone needs to take into consideration all these things, and then in not a final stage, but one of the stages of solving this complex equation is obviously fixing your pricing. And perhaps it's not just the entry fee. It's a number of things that you need to fix. And I didn't see that.
Yeah, it's a good point there, because I don't know if it's widely known, because people have had friends who visit there just for that reason or work there. So to your point of segmentation, if we're going to kind of do the classic LinkedIn and apply any outside thing to a business theory, we would say you could argue the freemium and a corporate strategy, or freemium and paid strategy. And in Dubai, from memory, I think you live tax-free. And the residents have a higher status somehow. I'm not quite sure. I don't want to get cancelled on LinkedIn or whatever on video, but they have a higher status. It's tax-free, and there's certain other benefits of being a resident or original resident. And then there's the fly-by-nights. Me, you flying into Dubai, just have normal rules, and we pay more. And so the classic segmentation, if you were going to apply the kind of corporatism, would say, well, as a 50,000 member, everything's free, more than free even. You've got free schools, fancy schools, this, that, parks. It's like Dubai, it's all free. But these pesky tourists, they're going to pay like corporate users, and they're going to pay a premium price, and then it can go up and up and up and stuff. So you've got the freemium users, the residents, 50,000, and they get everything free, municipality, this, river cleaning, that, water. And then you've got the paid client. So that then speaks to, if you were to enter the product, both of them are using the product of Venice, one could be freemium, and Dubai they are. The residents are freemium, and we're not freemium, we're paid.
Yeah, I can see that in Venice. I can see that in Venice because, the well-known Pareto rule, it's even worse for Venice. Yeah. Because if you think about it, you have around 20 million visitors visiting Venice every year. Let's say around 10 million are daily visitors. If you do the math, because they spend just, they buy a coffee or something like that, they spend a few bucks for the day that they spend there. The revenue coming from these guys is around, 50 millions, 100 millions tops. And the remaining 8 to 10 million spend something like 2 billions in the city. So the segmentation is that we get from half of the population, half of the visitors, something like 95% of the revenue. So this begs the question, why don't we not just limit the number of daily visitors, but eliminate it altogether? I mean, we will lose something like 5% of the revenue. You will have half the visitors. You solved it's not overcrowded anymore. You solved over tourism problems, issues, garbage, anything. Everyone would look happy. And I think the answer is it depends on what is your objective. And it needs to be connected with pricing. If your objective is to maximize, for instance, your revenue or the well-being of your visitors or whatever, then yes, you should definitely eliminate all daily visitors. Yeah. But if you want to Venice to be visited from as many people as possible, because it's a cultural monument site and it needs to be exposed all around the world. In this case, you can do that. So I'm not sure if these guys are clear about the expected outcome and why they want to do that. Not just in a quantified way, but also qualitatively. What's the direction that they need to follow? I'm almost convinced, obviously I'm not the mayor, I don't live there, perhaps I'm wrong, but I'm almost convinced that they really don't know. They are doing tactical things, not strategic things. They know that it's overcrowded, we have many daily visitors, so let's increase some prices, introduce some entry fees, and perhaps this will decrease the number of visitors. Actually, it was the other way around. The number of visitors increased after they introduced this entry fee, which was
Yeah,
amazing.
but you could say we normally have it about some of that behavioural science stuff, which as soon as you say it, it sounds a little bit woo-woo, and people are like, "Oh, no, I don't want to be tricked into mind tricks and stuff." But yeah, once you introduce a price which is low enough, it's just like a cost that you'll pay, and we find that in the UK now, because we have this thing called, we have many different charges for driving. So there's the parking, there's the clean air, which is called ULEZ, ultra low emission zone. Then there's a congestion charge, and all these charges, George, and essentially they are trying to sell a product. But even the people on the left and right are really confused. What is the product? Is the product clean air? Healthy kids? Maybe. Is it less traffic on the streets in London? So it's like Tokyo Ginza? That's the product, but say that then. What is it that you don't want people to park on the street and go shopping with big cars? And so we're never quite sure what the actual, would you see all these increasing charges, but we're never quite sure what is the product you're trying to produce, in Mayor of London, say. And if we understood that, we can disagree with the product, just like Venice can disagree we're not going to be Disneyland or Dubai. But at least they're very clear what their mayor wants and that they can vote for. And in London, we're very unsure because these charges make it so confusing, George, that we have no clue. And I think Venice is, whether they do 5 or 10 and they introduce another charge, it might be a surcharge. It ends up being just, I don't really understand what you're trying to do here.
Yeah, definitely. And funny you mentioned about parking tickets and everything, because there is the so-called willingness to pay. And we are all willing to pay a parking ticket of, let's say, €5 or £5. It's nothing, and we will do that because the actual parking, private parking, costs more. So the same with Venice. If they are charging just €5, this is not an entry barrier. I mean, it's just the cost of a coffee, something like that. Obviously, you will buy coffee, perhaps a gift from Venice. So you will spend, I don't know, 10, €15. Now it's 20, it's 25. Who cares? It's a visit to one of the best cities in the world, a historical site. So obviously you will spend €5. I would spend €50 as an entry fee. And I wouldn't care because it's just for one time for something spectacular. Obviously, I will do that. So it's not that they didn't even understand what is the direction or the outcome that they want to achieve. It seems that they are lacking strategy and direction, but also their pricing is a bit naive. They didn't even bother making, I don't know, simple questions among themselves, among them. Guys, is it really an entry barrier to charge 5 or 10 euros to enter such a great city? It's not. It's obvious. They don't need a market research or pricing research to do that.
Yeah. Interesting you say that, George, but when we look at some of the pricing mistakes that we see quite a lot of, whether it be some of the bad publicity that all the fast food venues are getting by reducing kind of their food footprint by not giving as much and then increasing the price up or doing dynamic. I don't know if it's as embedded as we think. So, a good example, I would make some classic schoolboy errors, maybe kindergarten errors, with marketing, digital marketing particularly. Whereas if there's a CMO in the room, she or he is going to be like, no, that's just kindergarten. That's like, I learned that on day one. And I don't know if there's that voice in the room in a polite way saying, oh, that's very funny, but that I learned that at age 2.5, and we're not going to do that. So I don't know if that voice is in the room.
Yeah, definitely yes. I was thinking now of something about Venice and their pricing. Also, something else that it's missing, and it's the talk of the town. It's dynamic pricing. And I was thinking, when I was in Barcelona, I was there before a couple of months, visiting the several monuments, Gaudi, architectural sightings, and all these things. And there was always a line, a queue to enter these monuments, and like the Sagrada Familia, for instance, and you had to book in advance in order to enter this and see it. If you hadn't done so, And when I'm saying in advance, that is even a month in advance, you were not admitted. It was not a matter of pricing, even if you were okay of paying 2, 3, 10 times the price, the ticket price, you were not admitted at all. And I was thinking that it looks like something like that, which is a sort of a dynamic, it's not dynamic price, it's dynamic admission, should have been incorporated here. So let's say it's November, the weather is bad, it's raining, we don't have a lot of visitors. Then allow them all enter the city for free. If they want to come and visit us, yes, why not? That's great. We're alone. We don't have them. But if it is July, August, obviously it's peak season, and we have millions of people who want to enter the city, then either don't allow them after a certain amount of people, or if you allow them, then the price goes sky high. It's dynamic pricing based on supply and demand. The supply is the same because it's just a city. It's a fixed capacity thing. But I don't know, charge even 2,000 if they want to enter the city in such a day where there are crowds visiting the city. Wait a couple of days perhaps, and perhaps you will find a day where there are less people and the ticket is not 1,000 or 2,000, which is extreme. It's just 50 or 20 or 30, which is okay. It's still expensive, but it's not extremely expensive.
Yeah, it's a good point. Just on 2, 3 days ago, there was a discussion on the radio, very similarly, because we know airlines at summer holidays ramp up the price, but people don't go beyond why they ramp up the price to the active point. They say, well, I can charge more because you actually can just visit, you could stay in Greece and I could stay in England. You don't have to travel on a plane. No one's telling you, forcing you on a plane. You choose to go on a plane, and therefore we believe that we can clear the market at 2.5 times the normal price of a flight. And you decide whether you think we can or not. And so that kind of, as you said, the cultural element with economics, where your emotion often clashes with true economics of they'd only charge that price if someone's willing to pay it. If not, they will want to sell the seats, they will sell them cheaper. And I think Venice is struggling with the same. Emotionally, I don't want to charge people 2.5, 3 times, 4x. But actually, I should. And they will pay it, the ones that really want it.
Yeah. I think that they take pride out of it. Because if you have one of the most visited cities around the world, perhaps it's the most visited city around the world. 20 million visitors per year. Right. Greece has around 35, we're expecting 35 to 40 millions in the whole Greece.
Wow, yeah.
And we are one of the, best or top touristic destinations in the world. We're top 5, 6 or something like that. And they have half of it in just one city, tiny city. So I think that they take pride out of it, and this is important. They need to understand exactly what they want to achieve there. If they want to achieve to have more money, for instance, then they should have done a more exhaustive and meticulous, let's say, pricing exercise. They need to hire pricing people to do that. They can't do it alone, possibly. But if in the end they still want to have 20 million people visiting the city, then really, there is no other solution than fixing the infrastructure somehow and not reducing the number of visitors. Right. So pricing is still part of the equation, but it's a different part of the equation. The product itself, which is the infrastructure, the image of the city, all these things. This needs to be fixed. Altered somehow. So again, I don't see that. I don't see that behind the strategy or the rationale behind introducing such a measure. That's a pity. Also, I searched the web to find, what has happened in Venice the past X years, 10 years or whatever. And there seem to be numerous of different attempts to limit over tourism.
Yes.
For instance, they banned some of the cruise ships if they have more than a certain number of visitors. Yeah. The same with groups. If they are above, I think, 20 or 25, they are not permitted in, regardless of the price they pay. So there are a number of measures, and still they have over-tourism. So it seems that they are dealing with that with circumstantial and tactical actions, not with a certain concrete strategy that they experiment fix it, adjust it, and eventually you see some concrete results. They don't see any concrete results as well.
Yeah, it's interesting.
At all. At all.
I don't know if you use a random reference, but I don't know if you saw the kind of McKinsey dustbin saga the other day, when McKinsey were hired, essentially lab in Greece, and we've had in Europe for like 20 years. But things that basically rats can't bite through because they're thick plastic. But that aside, to be fair to the I can't remember his name now gone, the New York mayor, he's basically saying we needed a strategy. And now we look at it and think that's insane. Of course, the strategy is obvious, but we live in Europe. And but your point of segmentation, what is done in Dubai and Disneyland is very obvious. They could copy that, but clearly they don't want to because that's cultural heritage and pride. But in this scenario here, if you did get the call up, George, and they did say, okay, George, we don't really want to make it a product, but we have decided the product is kind of cultural tourism, like medieval historic culturism. How would you go about taking them through that process of saying, okay, now you've told me that's the product, let's just say cultural 16th century, whatever, Renaissance, Italy, trip through Venice. How would you go about start thinking of different price segments and using AI to say, this is how you can maximize, whether it be the number of tourists or reduce number of tourists, maximize revenue, maximize welfare. How would you start to go and frame that for, let's just say it's the mayor?
Well, actually, I will do it exactly as I'm doing that, and everybody's doing that with their customers. First of all, you ask or you try to figure out together with the customer what are the key objectives out of the pricing equation they need to solve or the pricing exercise. So in this case, there are a couple of alternatives. So do we want to maintain or are we okay of decreasing considerably the number of daily visitors because this is what is at stake or not? And perhaps the answer would be no, surprisingly. But anyway, I will need to figure this out as a mayor with my people and especially the 50 people living permanently in there. There are other stakeholders as well. It's not just the permanent residents in Venice, because Venice is part of Italy and part of the touristic product of Italy. So reducing, let's say, by 5 or 7 millions the daily tourists and the overall tourists there, perhaps it would decrease also the number of overall tourist visits in Italy. So the government would have something to say about that. So you have different customers all over. That you need to take into consideration. Then another outcome is obviously money. I do understand that it's very annoying to see so many tourists around your neighborhood annoying you or whatever, but you are happy taking their money. And we're talking about 2 billion in a tiny, small city. So that's a lot of money. If I were living there and I was annoyed by tourists, I think I wouldn't compromise of losing something more than 5% top of my income in order to not be annoyed anymore. But anyway, that's just me speaking. I mean, the mayor has to discuss with the various stakeholders, which is permanent residents, travel agencies, because they are the payers usually, possibly with some random tourists also to get a review, the government as well. I mean, various stakeholders discuss, understand what is feasible and what should be done for everyone to be happy. There's no way that everyone is going to be happy, but you need to compromise. And once you compromise and eventually we can come up with a plan about your objectives, that's the first major exercise that you need to solve, then you need to reverse engineer everything and do the pricing exercise or anything else. Of course, perhaps you need to change infrastructure as well or whatever, and see what the pricing logic, first of all, needs to be dynamic, fixed, or whatever. What's the scope of application of the pricing? Shouldn't be just in the entry fees, or perhaps we should do something different, lower the tax fees for hotel staying, for instance. So there are many things that you need to consider, and eventually do pricing research, I don't know, predictive AI, dynamic pricing, I don't know, whatever, in order to introduce whatever you have thought is the best pricing strategy and pricing scheme. So there's a lot to be done, not just one.
Yeah, you say that, but so some of the stuff you said is because you had some numbers which are probably all over Google, Perplexity, etc. So the one thing I like you said is stakeholders. So I hadn't probably thought about the government as much actually, but it's a good point because Venice is one of the top three, other than say Rome, Venice, whatever, maybe one of the top 3 or 4 reasons to almost like lead gen or demand gen, which you want to call it, for Italy per se. So there's that. But you're right, I did Rome, Venice, and somewhere else. Can't remember the third part in like 3 days by train, 3-4 days by train. So you're right. The second thing is the stakeholders one. So you're kind of saying, without using the dreaded word committee, they would have like a committee of 1 government stakeholders, 2 mayoral council, 3 locals, could be like local activists or whatever, 3 businesses, 4 businesses, perhaps businesses that are obviously making money out of it, glass blowers, gondolas, etc., etc. So that could either be a council of 4 or 5 really powerful, important constituents. And then you said to them that you would kind of lay out or ask them, what are your objectives? Give me some numbers and bodies, users, you could argue, consumers, and give me some numbers in revenue and then growth, etc., down that line. And they would be like, oh, what's this guy talking about? But after 4 or 5 meetings, you would probably get some numbers and you've got some historical data because we do have travel industry data, fact, and they have data. So you actually, this is a perfect case for a pricing study because you have really good data, to be fair, pretty good data. You've got constituents who know their kind of constituents, don't know what you're talking about, but know their constituents. And you've got easily measurable, to your point about experimentation, back testable, forward testable, kind of realized, implied, where you can say, did it work every 3 months? And so it's a perfect petri dish for pricing experiments if they were willing to do one.
Definitely, yes. And actually, they are experimenting right now because this is how they call it. They call it a big trial.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a great experiment, by the way, but it's great that they are experimenting. At least they got this right. Coming back to the New York case that you mentioned before, that was a case where they were effective but not efficient. They should have hired McKinsey to do that. Perhaps they should have called a couple of European guys and would be more than happy to offer our guidance.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't have spent, I don't know, tens of millions or whatever they spent. But it was effective. And I think in case of Venice, because it's a more complex problem and it's more contained, perhaps because it's a small city, it's not a big city like New York. I think they need expert guidance. I think they need to hire, I don't know if it should be McKinsey or someone else or whatever, but they should hire someone to draft at least a couple of options about their strategy, help them draft or understand their key objectives and how to compromise everything. So they need to spend some money in someone or an agency that will help them understand what's the best course of action. Once they do that and decide eventually what to do, then there are many tactical things to do or strategic things to do within the umbrella and the direction that they will have followed. Pricing is one of them, but I would be surprised if in the end it's just pricing. I think it's the product itself that needs to change. Pricing may facilitate that, for instance, by changing the dynamics of visitors, segmentation and mix of customers of visitors visiting the city, and also by generating additional income, because I think this is easy, relatively easy to do in a city like Venice. I'm pretty sure they have some price erosion or money left on the table, and the pricing exercise could discover that and gain some extra money for Venice to invest for everything else needed to fix or improve their product. I mean, infrastructure or anything else.
Totally agree. So, to your point, I suppose they're still at the kind of, there are 3 stages we could argue. You could argue they've got to originate some pricing, some packaging and stuff, and then they've got to operationalize, which is no mean feat, make it operational and work, and then they've got to optimize it. And I think you're right. They're at kind of stage 1 where they kind of realize they need to originate some kind of pricing, packaging, and they have examples even if they do the opposite of Disney, Dubai, etc. And then they have to say, okay, how do I operationalize that? And that's some of the things you're talking to is operationalizing it isn't necessarily easy, but it's definitely not impossible. It's really, once you know what you want, you could charge your cruises extra, flights extra. You could easily get the money in a very concessionary way. And then optimizing it is be willing every 3-6 months to table it at a council meeting to say, is this working? Is this strategy working? And it's yes or no. It doesn't really matter as long as people see that you're visibly tabling it every 6 months. So going back to the New York scenario, even though we all laughed at the $4 million, the Nielsen and McKinsey, and the pictures of the trucks and all that stuff, but what they did is they wrapped their arms around there are a number of constituents, from the garbage truck guys and girls to the council to the local residents. The only people who weren't involved in the actual meeting were the rats, who also have a say in reality because they weren't too happy. But them aside, everybody could understand, okay, this is an excessive amount of money. It's really an excessive amount of money just for really project management. This wasn't something that needed wild experimentation. But it's so if someone's willing to pay that for really McKinsey just did project management and a few Photoshop. What would a council be willing to pay for this kind of study? We know it should be a lot more than they're willing to pay, because essentially, you say if there's 2 billion euros on the table, that could really be 3 billion. It could be 4. It could be, if we take Disney's, it could be 10. Dubai's similarly has got insane amounts of revenue from the fact that they've increased visitors to 20 million. And so, yeah, the money on the table could be 3, 4, 5 times the amount of money they're putting in now, with a reduction in visitors, even.
I think it would be even more. It would be even more. I mean, in my mind, obviously, I don't have all the facts of the data, but instinctively, I think that they could reduce over tourism, not eliminate it altogether, but reduce it. At the same time, the average price or money spent within the city could increase. So overall, they would have an increase in their income, overall income, although they don't have the same number of visitors every day, and a different mix, more overnight visitors versus daily visitors. But in order to achieve that, because you can't achieve all these things together easily, you have to have a combined strategy combining different elements. It's the mathematical part, let's say the pricing logic, the statistical processing, blah, 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 all these things. Yes, you need to do that. It's the communication also, because you're the mayor of the city, so you need to get some votes afterwards to get re-elected. So you need to communicate that as part of enhancing the experience of visitors, but also residents within the city, and not feeling like we are becoming more and more like a Euro Disney or Disneyland or whatever. So we are a product. Well, practically they are, and we all are products, sort of, in a certain context, but it doesn't need to feel like that, because people will obviously reject that. So communication is key for pricing anyway, and it's key for politicians. So communication is key. In this case, they need to have a great cover story. And it's not a great cover story that we have too many visitors, it's an everyday, so let's reduce them. Let's introduce a fee. That's not a cover story, that's a fact. We did that. Okay, it's a try.
Yeah, it's a very good point, Joe, because I was thinking about this the other day when we had a conversation, thinking that if you were being completely kind of, say you were Silicon Valley and you're being completely self-egregious, trying to shill your product, you would say every problem is a pricing problem. Now we're not that bad, but some of the stuff, obviously we have a new government in England and they will try some new stuff. Some of it will work, some of it won't work. But if you look at it through that view, that everything is really a pricing problem, whether it be congestion, space, electric cars, etc., they're all pricing problems in one way, shape or form. Then they move into deeper economic, socio-economic, etc. Then you would really have to go back to our first point, which is, what is the product you're trying to produce? And here I'm probably not quite clear still what their product is agreed amongst all those constituents. And similarly, I was trying to explain a tool to my wife yesterday, going off tangent, which was 11 Labs, which is a voice transcription. And she was like, okay, why do I want to transcribe my voice? Why do I want to replicate my voice so I can speak? I was like, well, you can, but who's got time to make 10 hours of podcasts every day? And she goes, yeah, but I don't want to make 10 hours podcast. So part of it is, if you know what your product you're selling, then you say, well, actually, my wife isn't the person you'll sell this to, because she's not trying to create 10 hours extra of a voice from 1 hour transcript type scenario. So I think in that case, yeah, maybe they have too many visitors to know that there are 3 or 4 cohorts of customers that are very clearly identifiable to your point of segmentation. And then there's a few stray elements here and there, but we don't really care about them. We want to really focus on the 3 or 4 cohorts so we can identify the features that they want.
Yeah, I like what you said, that eventually everything is a pricing problem. If you think about the bigger context, the umbrella of things capturing with pricing, pricing is practically one aspect, one side of a transaction between a seller and a buyer. Yeah. As a seller, I expect to get something, so some money for my work, my product, or whatever, and the customer on the other hand expects some value. Yeah. The value is the product, the customer experience from visiting the Venice in this case, or I don't know, whatever. But it's a bit bigger than that, because even if you think about it, if you are the seller of a product, you take some pride from your product. If your customers are happy and you are a creator, entrepreneur, or in this case, a resident of this great city, then you take some pride from visitors visiting the city and say, this is really great. We'll come back, or we'll say our friends to come there. Imagine if you're staying in a city and everybody that visits the city says, this is the worst city that I've seen. I really can't imagine how you lived here for your whole life. I won't visit that again. So obviously there is a price to pay, which is not always money. This is what I'm trying to say. But yes, in the broader context, it is a very complex, sophisticated pricing exercises with values exchanged. Some of them are monetized values, some of them are not, are intangible, different types of values. Someone needs to figure out this equation here in Venice. If it's McKinsey, it's McKinsey, I don't know. If it's Simon & Kucher, it's Simon & Kucher. If it's, I don't know, whoever. But it's definitely not the way that they're handling things. Even in New York, although we all ridicule them about the simplicity of things that they figured out. They reinvented the wheel. Practically, they reinvented the wheel. However, if I'm not aware about the invention called wheel, and I reinvent it, okay, shame on me that I reinvented it. I didn't call someone who had already done so, but at least I did it. Yes, and now I can live with this great invention. It was not an efficient way to do that because the invention was there for, I don't know, century or so, or half a century or so. But at least I did it and I solved a big problem for my city. So, okay, that's great. And I don't know how much the McKinsey study cost, by the way.
Between, some people say $1.6 million, some people say $4 million type thing. But
4 million. That's nothing for them. For New York,
totally.
It's nothing. It's nothing.
Really, but to your point about exogenous stuff, I don't know if you have it so much in Athens, but when the venture capital industry had a shit ton of cash, we had all the kind of scooters and the, not so much the ride sharing, that was the problem, but with the scooters, and we had the bikes, the e-bikes, etc. And we still have some now. And we've swapped ownership. Who runs them? They're the green company now. I can't remember what their name is. And to your point, there is a price that people do pay for a minute of cycling and stuff. But, and this comes back to Venice, is even though it's just basic economics, we don't measure the kind of externality price. And it's not impossible to measure. You don't have to be like Friedman or someone to measure what is the externality here. Well, actually, the externality is the bike in front of my drive. So it's not a big deal. You have to lift the bike up. It's quite heavy because you can't, obviously, I haven't got the ticket to pay to move it normally. So you move it out, that could be me or anybody, one of our neighbours, and you move it aside. So the positive is someone's paid some ride company, whatever bike company, some money. Then obviously the person's used the bike, so they're slightly healthier, which means they probably use the NHS a little bit less, maybe. And they've got to where they are. Negative, we've lost some money on the buses. Positive, they're healthier. Negative, I've got to pick up the bike, or a neighbour has. And so, to your point, the pricing element has really obvious prices. What's the price of the bike? And what's the losses? Well, no one's catching the bus. And then what are the aggregate negatives, which is me wasting time moving bikes out of the way of the car and stuff. But that's also not impossible to do. It's possible to do by just picking a number. They could pick a number of the discomfort from the bikes or visitors, or the rubbish for the visitors. How much does it cost to clean up the rubbish? That's the price that goes into the ticket. If it costs an extra 1 billion to do the cleanup every single night, 365 days, well, that's the cost that goes into the equation of you coming up with the price of the tourist.
While you were talking, I was thinking of something about, I mean, we're referring to Venice as a product, or Athens or New York or whatever.
Yeah.
And to some extent, it is a product. And the mayor is trying to solve problems about their product and improve everyone's life or whatever. But there is a big difference with the private sector or with companies. Because with companies, eventually you have a price that you need to pay to buy this product. With mayors, politicians, and everybody ruling countries or cities, it's not like that. They're buying, this is the price you pay, your vote eventually.
Yes, you do.
This is what they're buying, power. So again, the pricing equation, but again, price is not always what we think. It's not always money. In many cases, it is, but there are so many different aspects that you need to take care or consider. And the example that you said with the e-bikes, and we have them here in Greece as well, unfortunately, they are not so popular. I like cycling, by the way, so I'm not happy with that. But unfortunately, we don't have the right infrastructure in roads and everything to host many bicycles.
Yeah.
That's the problem. And it's not a flat city also. So that's an added problem as well. But anyway, having e-bikes or bikes, generally speaking, is great. This has to do with the quality of life. At the same time, yes, it might also affect some monetary things or issues because we are saving money. But also you're helping the planet. You see, objectives. This is why you need someone. If you can't figure it out alone, and usually mayors can't. They are a bit acting on the surface, and they should. There's no way to do it otherwise. They need someone or an agency or people who are experts. And they can dig into the details, see all the different perspectives. Eventually, the decision will be his, hers, the council of the city or whatever. But they need to see options, at least.
Yes.
Which are scrutinized, not scientifically, but business-wise, or I don't know, whatever-wise. And based on that, make a decision, but an informed decision, and then experiment, because they will need to experiment, obviously, especially big initiatives like that. So eventually, I would say kudos to the New York mayor, because he did it. If you think about it, he spent perhaps 3 million more than he should. Okay. And he solved a big issue.
Yeah.
That's okay.
It's a good point, because I was thinking, actually, you're back to the Venice, even this discussion online. Imagine if this was, obviously Danilo blew up and everybody discussing it and eventually got on mainstream news. That's actually a earned media advert for Venice, because people are like, well, actually, the mayor's really concerned about this. Wow, it must be really important. Let me book a ticket. Oh, but I'm going to expect to pay more because the mayor's actually worried. Oh, but I won't throw away rubbish because actually that's the reason why they. So all these kind of things are going through your mind of, actually, he's selling the product, but he's saying, I need to look after the product, otherwise it's going to really make it more expensive. So all these things in some people's mind will go through and say, actually, this is great. And in many ways, New York, he's selling us with this, you can call it a 4 million earned media campaign of, actually, we're going to have one less rat than last year, minimum. Ideally, if George has done his calculations, we'll have 10 less rats, 20 less rats. We've got like this curve of rats. And well, yeah, less rats is good. Okay, great. And similarly to the constituents, we're saying, well, you're going to have less rats if you actually pull out the thing, put it on the side street, and then bring it back. And so I think if you frame it in that way, it's a campaign, and this conversation is really a campaign for Venice actually caring about the constituents, really, in the good or bad way.
It's definitely a media, and you know what they say, there is no bad publicity, it's all publicity. And in this case, I mean, it's not that they did something wrong. Perhaps it's not effective as it should. It's not the best way to do pricing in the world, but okay, they care about their city, which is great. But I was thinking of something different when you said that.
Yeah, yeah.
Imagine that you are a tourist and one of the possible destinations that you are going to visit this summer or whatever, next summer or whatever, is Venice. If you talk with your travel agent, let's say 3 months before you actually book flights and everything, and they tell you that there is an entry fee of €5 to enter Venice, it will be indifferent. I mean, you wouldn't even consider it, think about it twice. You will forget it in a split second. But imagine if they told you that, hey, Gary, we need to book everything right now because there's dynamic theme pricing for the entry fee, and the closer we move into August where you're planning of visiting Venice, then you might be charged 1,000 instead of just €5 now, or €10 now, or €50 now. Then in this case, you would reject Venice.
Yeah.
You would rush in deciding now and booking everything right now. So it could help them, actually.
Totally.
It would help them increase revenue.
It would actually,
higher pricing.
You could turn Venice into like an online travel agent type OTA where they're constantly emailing you, George, you realise you're missing out on this flight. There's two seats left on the gondola. That could actually work, yeah. That easily could work. It depends how far they would go, yeah. But if money is the issue, then they could raise more money and they could easily get less people. But no, it's interesting because I think a lot of this is coming down to, I hear a lot more programs now, George, about some people going back to economics and all the way back to the Austrian school and Smith and stuff, and then all the way back to Friedman and saying, okay, where has economics failed us? Is it in the subsidies? It's mostly in the US, but it's also relevant in the UK. Is it in the subsidies? This is that. And UK, we announced this thing yesterday, which is about we're going to start kind of governmental energy companies. And whether or not it works or not, George, we don't know. But what it has affected is a number of people on the left or right or positive or negative just discussing it. And so then it filters through TikTok to the ordinary person thinks, okay, it sounds a crazy idea, the government, but actually I've been screwed over by all companies and stuff. So yeah, okay, they can do a terrible job, but no competition is bad competition. Like no publicity is bad, is good. So therefore, people are like, okay, I kind of get this. I don't really know enough about it, but it's good publicity. And in many ways, I think all these economic things, which eventually boil down to a price, either physical price that we can see or externality, that actually pricing is something people are consider more like. And I look back to, I like a lot of behavioral economics, and I think back to the fact that actually maybe 30 years ago, we never studied it. I never studied it at university, and I did economics. Didn't study it in accountancy. Didn't have anybody suggest it all the way through my banking career, all that 25 years. I'm thinking, wait a minute, there's this whole new study, which you may hate, but at least cover it. And it wasn't covered. Even to this day, I don't think it's well covered. And therefore, I think pricing is very similar. It might take 25 years, maybe not that long, to really enter mainstream that everybody thinks, yeah, think of the price, external, internal, what are we missing, socio-economic. But yeah, but I see pricing become much more relevant subject.
Definitely, yes. So any final thoughts about Venice and what they did or what they should do?
Just to say that I'm glad I went in 2011, and I'm glad I went to San Francisco in 2011 before it all kicked off. So I'm glad I went to all these places when we were in recession. But no, I think it's thanks for bringing it up, George. I think it's a brilliant study, and yeah, and I think pricing is in real life, and this is pricing in the world. So let's see what they do, and hopefully it goes well. How about yourself? What are your last thoughts?
First of all, I have Venice top of mind now as a potential destination or visiting soon. And it's not that I didn't like it, but I've never visited Venice. So now it's top of my head, top of my mind, because everybody's discussing about that. So as you said, it's earned media, it's publicity, and it's a great thing. I don't think they will figure it out, by the way. Not that there is no solution to this complex equation. I'm pretty sure there is, but when you have politicians and they have to compromise between different stakeholders and everything, it's usually very, very difficult to find a solution. It's different when you have a private organization or a company because you don't expect votes. You don't care about votes. You care about the well-being of your company, and it's a less complex organization also to run a company versus to run a city. However, I think that it's great that they are doing some things, even tactical things, and this is inspiration for us also to continue discussing about this great city.